there's a moment no one talks about. Not because it's too dramatic, but because it's too quiet. It doesn't scream. It doesn't cry. It just breaks. You're sitting there, maybe in your car, or standing alone in your apartment, with the sound of the refrigerator buzzing, the weight of a silence that feels ancient. And suddenly, you realize you've outgrown yourself. Not the world, not other people, yourself. The version of you that tried so hard to fit in, the one that smiled on cue, the one that said yes when everything inside screamed no, the one that thought suffering in silence meant strength. And it hits you. This version of you was never truly alive. It was just performing for love, for approval, for the illusion of safety. You wore masks so long, you forgot the shape of your own face. But here's the truth. You can't heal what you keep pretending to be. And now, the pretending is collapsing. You look around, and every relationship that once felt comforting now feels claustrophobic. Every belief you held about who you are starts to tremble, because part of you knows something has to die. Something old, something scared, something false. And yes, it's terrifying, because death is not just physical. The ego bleeds. The identity resists. The comfort claws. But deeper than the fear, there's something else. Relief. Because for the first time, you're not running from yourself. You're watching the lie dissolve. You're not breaking down. You're breaking open. The caterpillar isn't dying. It's becoming. But becoming hurts. It cost you everything that was never really yours. It asks you to stand naked, without titles, without validation, without applause. And in that nakedness, you meet the real you. Not the one they shaped, but the one who waited beneath all the roles, beneath all the shoulds, beneath all the coping. This isn't just a crisis. It's an initiation. And freedom doesn't begin when you add more to yourself. It begins when you bury what was never truly you. They told you to be kind. They told you to be agreeable, to not make waves, to always consider others, to be nice. And so you were. You said yes when you didn't want to. You smiled when you were tired. You forgave when no one asked for it. You bent over backwards just to be liked. Because somewhere along the way, you were programmed to believe that your goodness was your value. That being soft made you lovable. That self-erasure was a virtue. That discomfort was a tax you paid to be accepted. But they didn't tell you what that conditioning would cost. They didn't mention that being likable and being respected are not the same thing. Because what you learned wasn't love. It was performance. Likability conditioning. That quiet, invisible script handed to you by broken systems, by absent fathers, by exhausted mothers, by teachers who rewarded obedience over honesty. And so, you became likable, but not powerful, agreeable, but not authentic. Because in their world, your warmth had to come at the expense of your boundaries. Your silence was mistaken for humility, your helpfulness for submission. You were trained to believe that asserting yourself was rude, that wanting more was selfish, that having standards made you difficult. This is the warmth versus competence trade-off. The more approachable you became, the less seriously you were taken. And you didn't notice it at first, because the praise felt good. The temporary approval felt like belonging. But beneath the surface, you were vanishing. You were training the world to overlook you, to use you, to underestimate you. Because in the availability bias of social behavior, what is always present is seen as less valuable. What's easy to access loses its mystery. And you made yourself too accessible, too open, too generous, too nice. And slowly, they stopped listening, stopped caring, stopped respecting. Not because you were weak, but because you refused to be real. Because you kept choosing to survive through softness, when what you needed was the strength to disappoint people, the strength to say no, the strength to walk away, the strength to stop apologizing for existing. You thought you were being good, but you were just being programmed. And in doing so, you trained the world to treat you as ordinary. In the real world, emotions are currency. Not love, not kindness, not intention, but energy, presence, attention. Every interaction you've ever had, every message left unread, every favor asked and never returned, every moment you waited for a reply that never came, was a transaction. Not because people are evil, but because this is how human dynamics operate. You give too much, they devalue it. You withhold, they crave. Because power doesn't reside in who gives the most. It resides in who needs the least. He who needs less holds the power. Nietzsche understood this. So did Schopenhauer. The less dependent you are on others' validation, the more magnetism you radiate. But when you place your emotional needs entirely in others' hands, you become a beggar in your own kingdom. And this is the trap you didn't see coming. You thought being emotionally available would build intimacy, but it only taught them that your presence was guaranteed. You were always there, answering, apologizing, checking in, forgiving. They never had to earn it. And what comes easy is never respected. You became emotionally cheap, not because your love wasn't real, but because it lacked price. It lacked pause. It lacked distance. Scarcity breeds value. In economics, in relationships, in life, the ones who hold the most sway in a room aren't the loudest. They're the ones who know when to walk away, who don't chase, who don't flood others with their need to be needed. They don't confuse availability with affection. They don't trade their soul for attention. They operate from within, stable, centered, and dangerous in their stillness. So ask yourself, what price are you putting on your energy? What signal are you sending with your overgiving? If you don't value your emotional currency, why would they? And in that silence, when you stop pouring out endlessly, you'll realize your absence says more than your presence ever could. There's a certain kind of man you've seen before. Maybe you've been him. He's the dependable one, always agreeable, always understanding, always available, the nice guy. He listens, he supports, he gives, and gives, and gives. And yet, he's ignored, taken for granted, passed over, not because the world is cruel, but because he trained them to see him as disposable. This man lives by an unspoken rule. If I'm nice enough, they'll love me. If I'm patient enough, they'll stay. If I sacrifice enough, they'll finally see me. End of quote. But they don't. They see desperation. They see insecurity wrapped in politeness. They see a man who hides his resentment behind a smile. And eventually, he breaks. Not loudly, not violently, but silently, alone, swallowed by the very approval he chased. Because what he gave wasn't love. It was a performance. A constant attempt to earn a place in people's lives by burying his own needs, his own anger, his own darkness. But here's the harsh truth. You cannot be whole by amputating your shadow. Carl Jung said it best. You must integrate the shadow. You must face the parts of you that you've been told are too much, too cold, too selfish, too masculine. Because until you own your anger, you'll be ruled by passivity. Until you respect your boundaries, you'll keep getting used. And until you stop being the nice guy, you'll never be the real man. The one who commands presence, because he no longer begs for it. This collapse isn't the end. It's the necessary death before rebirth. Because the world doesn't need more agreeable men. It needs men who are rooted. Men who can say no, without flinching. Who can walk away, without explanation. Men who don't betray themselves, just to be liked. He stopped trying, not out of bitterness, but because he finally understood. Peace is not found in being chosen. It's found in choosing yourself. This man, the one you barely notice, is different now. He doesn't rush to reply. He doesn't explain his silence. He doesn't chase after energy that rejects his presence. You used to overlook him. Now, you can't ignore him. Because something shifted. He no longer wears the mask of the nice guy. He let that part die. Buried it without a funeral. And what rose in its place was clarity. He walks slower, but with intention. He speaks less, but each word cuts deeper. He laughs rarely, but when he does, it shakes the room. This is the stoic man. He's not cold. He's composed. He's not cruel. He's calibrated. He's faced his shadow and lived to tell the tale. You can feel it in his presence. He doesn't seek approval anymore. He grants it. He doesn't ask if he's enough. He already knows. And when the world tries to test him, through rejection, silence, disrespect, he doesn't flinch. He doesn't react. He observes. Because he understands, not everything deserves a response. Not every invitation to chaos requires his attendance. This man lives by different rules now. Not the ones society gave him, but the ones he carved out of pain. As Krishnamurti said, it is no measure of health to be well adjusted to a profoundly sick society. So detached, not from people, but from illusions, from the idea that his worth must be proven, that love must be earned through sacrifice, that masculinity must be softened to be accepted. He realized a man in control of his emotions isn't suppressing them, he's leading them. That's the shift, from the chaos of needing others to the quiet power of needing nothing but alignment. You don't become distant because you stopped caring. You become distant because you finally started caring about yourself. This isn't numbness. It's discipline. Emotional discipline. It means your peace is no longer up for negotiation. It means you don't hand over the steering wheel of your life to whoever happens to be the loudest in the room. They'll say you've changed. Colder, quieter, less available. But that's the point. You're no longer throwing warmth at those who've proven they can't handle the flame. You don't retaliate. You don't explain. You don't beg. You simply remove your energy. And that's enough. Because silence is no longer your weakness. It's your boundary. You've learned that emotional detachment is not detachment from life. It's detachment from illusion. You can feel everything, but you don't let everything control you. You can love deeply, but you don't lose yourself in the process. This is where you stop trying to fix broken dynamics and start protecting the clarity you bled for. Because if chaos has to be tolerated just to keep a connection, it's not connection, it's self-betrayal. They'll say, you're hard to reach now. Good. You've outgrown the performance. You've stopped tap dancing for approval. You've stopped dressing your silence up in palatable explanations. You don't play games anymore. You don't initiate. You don't chase. You don't remind people how to treat you. Your absence does that for you. You didn't become cold. You became focused. You didn't stop loving. You stopped leaking. You thought your kindness was what made people stay. You believed your availability was your value. So when you finally went silent, you expected nothing but emptiness. But something strange happened. They noticed. Not when you were speaking, but when you stopped explaining. Not when you gave more, but when you gave nothing. Your absence started echoing louder than your presence ever did. People who once ignored you suddenly remembered your name. Those who took your energy for granted now ask where it went. And you realize it was never that they didn't see your value. It's that they never had to pay for it. They were overdrawing from an emotional bank you never charged interest on. But now, you've closed the account. Your coldness is not cruelty. It's clarity. You no longer beg to be understood. You let silence speak for you. You no longer perform vulnerability for validation. You guard it like sacred fire. This shift doesn't just change your relationships. It filters them. It separates those who only loved your weakness from those who can hold space for your strength. Yes, some people will leave. Let them. They weren't leaving you. They were leaving the version of you who tolerated disrespect. What remains is rare, solid, respectful. You're not surrounded by more people. You're surrounded by better ones. Because when you stop chasing love, you attract respect. And when you stop being easy to access, you become impossible to forget. Your silence was never empty. It was sacred. It was surgical. It was strategic. And now, they don't remember you for how much you gave. They remember you for how cleanly you walked away. There comes a moment when you no longer fear being misunderstood. You no longer rush to explain your piece. You no longer crave the noise that once made you feel alive. Because you've realized coldness is not the end. It's the beginning of inner authority, of self-respect, not borrowed from others' approval, of silence that nourishes, not punishes. You didn't become cold to hurt others. You became cold to stop hurting yourself. The part of you that kept giving until you bled, that part had to die. The version of you that confused loyalty with self-destruction had to be buried. And in its place, a new self rises, rooted, Zoverein, still. Because coldness, when chosen, isn't emptiness. It's clarity. It's the clarity to walk away when your soul knows it's done. It's the clarity to not chase closure from doors that were never meant for you. It's the clarity to be okay alone, not because you don't care, but because you finally do. This is not a loss. It's a liberation. You didn't lose your warmth. You refined it. You didn't lose your love. You gave it back to yourself. And now, you move through life with fewer words, but deeper presence. With fewer people, but greater peace. The man who stands alone is always feared because he cannot be controlled. And that man is you now.